everyone. I'm Kudzi, and this is my sister Kim, and we're the Empowered Sisters. And today we're going to be talking about fighting negative self-talk. And we're just going to start off by, looking at where does negative self-talk come from, and what I've seen, what I've read, what I've experienced from negative self-talk and where it comes from. And I have three different areas really where negative self-talk comes from. And just to start off by saying, what is negative self-talk? Like when you talk down to yourself, like discouraging words, negative words towards yourself, like targeted at yourself. And the three different areas that I had were from self and your previous experience and your previous defeats. So I feel like sometimes when when you've had a bad experience, you kind of form a narrative about that. Maybe you've tried to learn a skill and it hasn't gone well, and you just tell yourself, I'm never going to be good at this. So you just kind of form that narrative, I'm never going to be good at this. And when you attempt to maybe try to learn that skill again, or maybe another skill, that negative voice has already been formed in your head, and it starts that negative self-talk. I'm never going to be able to do this. I suck so much at this. And you have already formed that because of your past experiences. And it's almost like a fear that you now have of attempting to do that again. And it comes up as you try and do similar things that remind you of that experience. And the second place that I've seen that negative self-talk comes from is from others, the voices of other people around you. So what you have heard being said about yourself, right from childhood to adulthood. Like, what have people said about you? If people have said, you're not good at this, or you've got, you look like this, or whatever, you start to, those words have been said to you, and now you start saying them to yourself because you've heard them so many times. So it also forms like a narrative, they always said I was this. So you start to kind of believe it, and it becomes your truth, and it becomes that voice that always says, defines you. And the third area and this one's a very interesting one, but I think this one's actually my favorite one to discover, that your negative self-talk sometimes comes from people who are not even here anymore. So these are like your ancestors, people who have lived before you, and that comes through ancestral patterns. For example, like if in your family no one has ever been successful at business, I feel like when you try then to go into business, you hear the voices of those who have gone before you telling you that this is not our space. We have never been successful at this. Because sometimes we hear these negative voices, or we just feel this negativity about something that we don't even know where it's coming from. And it's coming from, those ancestral patterns and those things that have just have come through you, through your DNA. And even people who have never advanced, in their education, like if in your family, generations and generations before, no one has ever, completed school, no one has ever gotten a degree. When you try and attempt to do those things, you might just, have these negative voices that you hear, or, oh, no one has ever done that. Oh, don't even bother. We're not good at this. So I think that's an interesting one that, people don't often consider, like the voice of, the ancestors, so to speak.
I totally agree with that. And I think sometimes it's also about recognizing the environments you purposely put yourself in. So this time, think about your friends, the kind of people you choose to hang out with at work, How did they think? What are the sort of things they say about situations? Because I think it's very easy to internalize their narratives as well. So sometimes it is a close friend or someone who you care about, but they have a certain way of looking at the world that is particularly negative. And I think it's very easy to like internalize all of that and then basically carry it over into your own thoughts, and then you get sort of stuck in that negative pattern of thinking. So I think it's also like realizing how you're thinking about it, but how the people close to you think as well. So that if you notice that you maybe don't like how they constantly focus on the negative in anything, you either start to distance yourself from situations like that, or you start to like purposely like challenge them to see if they're capable of seeing it another way, and they may actually appreciate like a new and refreshing perspective on that.
I love that. Yeah, definitely. And I think the closer the people are, the more the influence, because
Exactly.
it's kind of like you have this bond, and you have so many shared things, including shared perspective. And yeah, it's very important to challenge that. And also wanted to look at like the types of negative self-talk. Like, what are the different types that they
So
are?
yeah, I actually did some reading around this because I knew there was negative self-talk just as a principle, but I didn't really realize that there were quite a lot of different types of it. And this also all depends on where it stems from to begin with. But one of them is filtering. This one is pretty common for people, where basically you tend to focus on the negative. So you filter out all the positive aspects of a situation and you zone in on the negative, and that's essentially all you see. And the problem with this is you then start to focus on all the wrong things and you stop to see the potential for good in other areas. So I think this is very common. I've seen it in myself and with other people when they're talking. So I think it's important to acknowledge and hopefully start to tackle by being aware of it. Another type is personalizing. Something I see a lot again, where everything is about you. So if something negative happens, somehow it's about you still. So for example, you're meant to go out with your friends, right? And you guys have planned a night out and everything was set. And then two people pull out, right? So maybe they had other obligations or they fell ill. But what you tell yourself is they didn't want to hang out with me. I'm not a good friend. They don't like me. They don't enjoy my company. And that's why everyone is pulling out, right? They're all just trying to find excuses not to be around me. So by personalizing the situation, you've made things that weren't at all about you. And obviously those are negative things. You've now put yourself in a very negative light when no one else was seeing it that way. So I think this can also alienate you from certain relationships, because anything that happens that you perceive as negative, you make yourself the center of it, and you sort of start to blame yourself for these things and start to see yourself as being unworthy of being in this relationship with this person, or of being in a certain position, because anything wrong that happens is directly because of you. Another one of them is catastrophizing. It's one of my favorites because it's a funny word as well, but I love it. But essentially, you take one small bad thing and then you blow it up into the biggest, like, scary thing you can imagine. So, for example, you cut your finger, right? And your finger's not healing well. And your first thought is, oh my goodness, I must have cancer. I can't believe I'm getting cancer when I'm this young. What's going on? How am I going to survive cancer? Who's going to help me? And now you've taken your mind on this like horrible, like catastrophe path, when what might be going on may be as simple as you didn't really take good care of the wound, and that's why it's not healing well. But in your head, it's already much bigger, much scarier, and too overwhelming to even begin to deal with. And in those situations, I find that you feel powerless, because once you've made a catastrophe out of it, like, who are you as a human being to try and fight that, to try and overcome that. So, you know, you basically paralyze yourself with these thoughts about everything going wrong, and you can't stop it, you can't control it. Everything is just spiraling out of control. And the last common one that I think is also quite common is polarizing. So the idea that there's good and bad and nothing else. So for example, you had a goal you wanted to achieve and you did make some progress, but you didn't quite get there. And the way you would polarize the situation is to look at it and be like, I'm a complete failure and nothing I do is good enough. So instead of realizing that you actually did manage to achieve something, you may not have reached the ultimate goal, but you made some progress. You know, you've grown and you've learned something out of the experience. You're choosing to focus on the fact that you didn't reach your ultimate goal. And that is very disheartening for anyone trying to achieve anything in life, because anytime you don't get to the finish line you've set for yourself, then I'm a failure. And that's all you're seeing. You're failing to see that you have actually grown and improved in your life. And, you know, there is still something good in there, despite the negative side of you not reaching your ultimate goal. So yeah, those are just some of the common types that I discovered through research and actually could put a name to. I think I've seen all these types, both in myself and in other people, just like when they talk. But I think being able to put a word to it, like being able to put an actual name to it, helps you to recognize it and become more aware of what it is you're doing.
Wow, that's so insightful. And that just made me think like, why? I just wanted to share something that I used to do personally. And it kind of explained like some of the negative self-talk that I used to have. And the why for me in some of them was the fear of disappointing others and the fear of not being able to handle a negative response from another person. So for example, like, you know, we'll take the classic example, like, you know, you're in school, you didn't do so well, you've got your report and you're afraid to take it to your parents because of what they're going to say. So in order to prepare myself, because I would be so afraid that I won't be able to handle any negative response, like I feel like if it'll come, like I'm not prepared for it. So what I do to prime myself for that, for receiving something negative or anticipating that I'm going to receive negative feedback or negative response, is to beat myself up, to say, okay, if I do it myself, like if I then hear it from someone else, like I've already said it to myself and I'm ready and I'm prepared. So it was kind of like that priming of self. And, you know, to say, I would rather hear it from myself, because if it comes from someone I love or someone that I care about or someone I'm afraid to disappoint, it's going to be so hurtful for me. So I just need to prepare myself for that. And I noticed like when I was younger, that was definitely like the root of some of my negative self-talk when it came to like telling myself like, oh, you're not, like you should have done better. Because I'll be thinking, at least, or if my parents say that, I'll be all right. I'll be all right to hear it. And I think, you know, that's just interesting, like, you know, on the why. And I think also like, sometimes just protecting ourselves, it's just rooted in protecting ourselves and protecting our emotions. And it's kind of like, you know, funny that we protect ourselves by harming ourselves. Like we think we're protecting ourselves by actually harming ourselves. But that's kind of like some of the instincts that are coming into play when you are having some of that, you know, negative self-talk.
Definitely. I think just hearing you talk made me think about how when you're also really ambitious and you want to do well, sometimes you think being harsh on yourself is the way to get there. So if you want to be really productive, really successful, you have to be really harsh with all your mistakes and basically point them out and drill it into yourself how much of a failure that whole situation was. But I think all that does is erode away your self-esteem and decrease your resiliency. So now you're less likely to bounce back from something like that because you're already feeling so small after that situation that you don't feel you can rise up to the occasion and either try again or try something different, you know, give it a new, fresh approach. So yeah, definitely, I definitely see like what you mean by that. And I think depending on what formed your inner self-critic, then that can be like depending on where it came from, then you get essentially the result of how you talk to yourself and why you think it's helpful, even when it's not really.
Interesting. And so I wanted to say, okay, now we know like the different types and you know why we kind of do it. What can we do like to fight the negative self-talk, to stop the negative self-talk? What are some of the things that we can do?
So one of the things I like is to name that voice in your head, right? So that helps you to separate the idea that you're not your thoughts. So you are not everything you think, and not everything you think is correct, right? So the way you can do this is by giving that inner self-critic a name. So for example, calling it the old grouch, you know, they always have something negative to say. They're never happy about anything. They're always just sulking. There's always something wrong. So when that voice kicks in, you'll be like, it's the old grouch again. Okay, I know how to tackle this. So giving it a name again is helping you to become aware of when it kicks in, I feel. So that's one way you can do it. And then I think thinking about it in the sense of what would I say to a close friend in this exact situation. So
I love that one.
yeah, so instead of what my own like inner self-critic is telling me, like beating me down, these are the words I would use with the loved one if they were struggling through something, or would I actually be more compassionate? So that helps you to think of it in a more self-compassionate way. If you start to realize that your thoughts are so harsh to the point that you never utter those same things to someone you really care about, then maybe you're taking it too far and you're being way too hard on yourself and it's no longer productive.
Yeah, I love that. And just another one that I love is, you know, affirmations, because I think sometimes we need to build our inner vocabulary. If we're so used to negative self-talk, that's all we know how to say to ourselves. And we have never, and we have said it repeatedly, and it has just now, you know, been in our subconscious mind. And now is to add more positive self-talk in your subconscious mind that you can draw upon. So it's really writing down affirmations about yourself, things that are positive that you believe about yourself, or that you want to believe about yourself, or that you would want to hear someone say to you when you are feeling down. And just repeat that kind of like as a daily self-care practice. You can have like, you know, a few affirmations, or you know, it's good to start with a few and then just repeat those to yourself. And, you know, it just helps you practice how to actually say something positive to yourself. And when you catch yourself saying something negative, you can then pull on those positive affirmations that you have for yourself. You know, like, you know, you can say, I am worthy, like, you know, I am where I need to be. Everything is working out for my highest good. You know, all the things, I've done my best, and you know, that's all I can do. I've done the best I could in this moment. And just really find positive things that you can say to yourself repeatedly to form your inner positive vocabulary. And I find, you know, just like kids, I remember when my son started talking, he had a few words that he could say, and you knew that if he's talking, he's either saying, or mommy, daddy, or water, you know, like he had very limited vocabulary. And it doesn't matter what you ask him, the answer is mommy, daddy, or water, or, you know, or he starts blabbering into some unknown baby language. So it's about, but now he's like fully, you know, grown, 5 years old, and he has a lot more vocabulary, and you can actually have a conversation with him, and he has a lot more to say. So I think it's about, you know, having a positive conversation with yourself. And you can't do that with just limited, because I find with negative self-talk, it's usually few things that you repeat to yourself. like I'm a failure or I'm not good enough. There are very few things that you repeat yourself over and over and over again. So if you have more to say about yourself, then you're most likely to draw on that when you need to.
Yeah, definitely. And I just remembered the part about emotions as well. So sometimes we have negative self-talk around our own emotions. So you wake up on a particular day and you're feeling a bit low. You can't exactly pinpoint why, but then you start to beat yourself up about that too. So you're like, why are you feeling so sad? Like, why are you so ungrateful? Can't you see your life is amazing? Like, what's wrong with you? You always have to be down. Everyone else is having a good time. Like, why can't you just like suck it up and smile? That sort of like negative self-talk around your emotions. And I think what that does is it actually helps to create a mood because your emotions are reflexive, right? So your brain gets a certain stimulus and it releases a certain hormone and that goes throughout your body and then you feel a certain way. This doesn't last very long. It lasts about a few seconds to a few minutes, but then you prolong that by creating a certain mood around that particular emotion. So what you tell yourself about that emotion, you label it negative, and then you continue to have a negative dialogue about it in your head, can continue to perpetuate what should have been something you felt for just a few minutes to something you're feeling for days or weeks on end. So I think another helpful thing to do is to be able to recognize that emotions aren't necessarily good or bad, they just are. So if we can recognize that we're feeling a certain way, if we don't understand why, then become curious about it. So try and see what unmet need you have at the moment that's causing this particular emotion to arise in you, and see if you can meet that need to hopefully counteract that negative emotion and essentially turn around the mood so that the actual mood around it does not itself become negative. You can still have a positive mood even after experiencing what at first was a distressing emotion.
Yeah. And yeah, I just wanted to say, like, just to close, I think another thing, like we've spoken about this in our previous videos, self-care. And, if you had been prone to negative self-talk, it's still there. Like, even if you start to practice positive self-talk, it'll still be there somewhere, in your subconscious mind, deep, deep down, far away. But the thing is, if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't, make sure that you get enough rest, enough nutrition, you're not catering to your own needs, and you get to the point of being depleted, you always draw to the negative. Like when you are down, when you are tired, when you are low, you always reach back for all the negative stuff, all the bad stuff, too much sugar, too much alcohol, negative self-talk. Like that's when those things come out. And you find that when you are just tired and out of it, you're more prone to talk negatively to yourself. But when you're feeling happy and healthy and you've worked out, you've eaten well, you're more likely to talk positively to yourself. So just a reminder to everyone that, take good care of yourself, prioritize your needs, prioritize yourself, and it'll just make you, help you to get into that more positive mental space where you're more equipped and ready to have more positive things to say about yourself instead of the negative.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. So, all right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you in our next video.
Thank
Bye.
you, everyone. Bye.